Hi, Kuwarjeet. Thank you so much for coming on to the podcast today. And it's such an honor to have you here. So let's dive into our first question. So let's start from the very beginning. Can you tell us a little bit more about how your post-secondary experience have led you to where you are today?
First of all, thank you for having me. So, when it comes to post-secondary, I started with Ryerson and now it's Toronto Metropolitan, so the name changed. And since high school, I wanted to do journalism because I've been doing so much media content creation throughout high school. For example, yearbook, and then going into like the school newspaper. And then when I got in, I learned a lot new stuff when it comes to journalism. So first thing we learned was CP style. I learned like how Canadian press works. But at the same time, school doesn't teach you how to pitch stories to different publications. And while I was at school, what I used to do a lot was basically reach out to other profs, other journalists who are BIPOC, person of colors, and ask them for advice and ask them what I could do better. And throughout time, I got my first publication, which was at National Observer. And from there onwards, it just built up the momentum and I started pitching other spots. And now I'm actually working at Yahoo News, which is pretty cool because before that, I also did internship at CBC. So it was like a combination of different things happening, but at the same time, I still don't know what kind of journalism I want to do because there's so many different types of journalism nowadays. There's written, there's podcast, that's what I'm on right now, and then there is video. So it's really hard to choose one specific type. So I'm just still figuring that out. But at the same time, I love writing. So from day one, I've been writing about issues that have been affecting my community, the community, but at the same time, I'm pretty open to writing about other issues. So I've done like some election work, I've done some law work, going to the courthouses, doing some stories on that. Recently, what happened with John Tory, he stepped down, and how there's going to be new mayor elections happening. So there's a lot of different stuff happening.
Yeah, it's wonderful to see that you are like trying out different roles and just figuring what is the best and the most perfect position that you want to pursue in the future. And then I know you talked a little bit about your internship at CBC already, but that actually like linked to our second question, which we would love to hear like a bit more detailed experience that you have with CBC. Can you just share with us what's the specific role that you are at CBC, and then what did you learn from that wonderful experience?
So my internship was at CBC Radio, and I work as like an audio slash radio intern. So what does that mean is I work with the control panel. So I needed a break from all the editorial stuff I was doing. So I was like, let me try something new. With the role itself, what it involved was going around to different shows and shadowing the AP Tech associate producers and the technical support. So whenever there's a live show happening, we're in the background controlling all the volumes, controlling all everything throughout the control room. And I actually got to some of the shows live, which was pretty fun. I also have some pictures on social media posting about that. But in detail, the whole role was learning how the CBC control room works and the different softwares they use and how the whole management works in the sense like radio is so much work. It looks easy like when we listen to it, but there's so many different elements that goes to have that piece done. For example, with the news shows I went to, they have to research all the news that's happening around the world. They have to come up with all the audio. They have to contact each correspondent that's in Ukraine, for example, and try to get all of the audio together for the show. And if they don't, they have to come up with something else at the same time. So they need to have like a plan B. So all the thinking and editorial stuff was pretty fun to see, but at the same time, the role was more hands-on in the sense like I was shadowing people, seeing how their day-to-day works, and at the same time, I also got to do some of the live shows in the sense like how do you put up the feeder when you have to put down how do you fade in and out. So it was like a mixture of different technical things. It also involved like some of the editorial side of things. So it was a mixture, but at the same time, it was a good way to get a break from all the editorial stuff that was happening because news never stops. Even right now, there's something happening. So and I think one big highlight from the whole experience was when John Tory stepped down. We were just sitting there talking about whenever like there's the provincial election happen past few years. So the Liberal candidate stepped down, and then the NDP candidate stepped down, and then we were just talking about that. The next thing we see on the TV was Charter Star. The CBC was reporting on like how. John Terry stepped down, and then everyone went on rush to cover that because it needs to be up in like 30 minutes. So you see how small frame things are when it comes to covering stories.
Yeah, that sounds like a really interesting and memorable experience. And then I'm for sure that every time you show like radios and shows are up on the news, you'll be very proud for all the work that you and your team are accomplished together. So that's like a really amazing experience. Now move on to our next questions. So I know that you start a new role at Yahoo. Congratulations. Landing a job right now, it's really competitive in today's job market. And then is there any interview tips and tricks that you can give to the people who are still actively seeking for a job and then striving to attain their dream career?
My whole job is actually interviewing people as a journalist. So it really depends on how you're talking to people. One big tip that I have gotten from all the mentors that I have in past was just be yourself. If you have a question, ask the question. Never back out because the worst thing would be you won't get an answer. It would be no, but at least you won't have the regret of not asking the question afterwards. And second big thing is also if you be yourself, you'll be confident by yourself and you would know what you're talking about. So and also one big thing is don't lie on your resume because I've seen people do that and that also messed them up in the long road. One big tip is just actually reaching out to people afterwards. So, for example, if you had an interview, reach out to them. Thank you for the interview, for example, because those small gestures help you make an impression.
I think these are really useful tips and advice for all those students or like just general job seekers who are still finding their dream jobs. And then this is just a quick follow-up questions and it's out of my own curiosity. For journalism, is portfolio some add-on elements that you can also send to the interviewers, such as your past work or the past article that you write?
So when you apply for any journalistic jobs, especially on the written side or on broadcast side, they do ask for samples of your work because they want to see how your work works and what's your style like. So for example, when I applied to Yahoo, the editor reached out and she asked for like a few work samples. But the most part, Yahoo actually reached out to me. I never knew there was a position available. So they reached out to me after seeing all the work I was doing locally and some of the international stuff I've done. But at the same time, building up that portfolio is a big thing, especially in journalism, because every kind of journalism, there is something that you need to show that you know how to do. So I'll give you a really good example. If you're doing photojournalism, for example, you need to show them the pictures that you have taken in past to show them like you're a photojournalist. It's just evident based stuff in the sense like you are showcasing what you're capable of but at the same time, what are new challenges you could take?
So let's talk a little bit more about your role at Yahoo as a contributing writer. Can you share with us the day in the life as that role in Yahoo?
Starting of the week, I just pitch articles, and then throughout the week, also pitch articles. This is more like a freelance contract where I do work in between. I have my own hours for a pitch to go in. I talk to my editor. A big part of the whole freelance work is actually convincing the editor to take the piece. So I recently wrote a piece on Visakhi, which is what we celebrate in Sikh Heritage Month, which is like the birth of Khalsa, the baptized in the whole community, how that came around. And a big part of that is also because a lot of people don't know about Visakhi. And when it comes to April Sikh Heritage Month, people just say it's a Sikh New Year, but it's actually not Sikh New Year. Either it's like a harvest festival. It's a totally different thing. And how just having those small details helps with pitching those ideas, for example. But at the same time, my day to day is for like I pitch the article. If I get the article approved, then I start working on it. So I have my first draft, and I send my draft back. He edits it, and then see if the edits make sense, and then we're all good to go. And then after that, once we have the whole final draft ready, we go into looking for pictures, or if I have taken any pictures in the past, because we try to get original work done as much as possible. If we don't, we could take pictures from like the Canadian press, for example, and use them. And after that, there's just she gives me a date, then I would know like that's when my article is going out, and I just try to promote it on my social media. So that's how most of the stuff works. But with the Yahoo gig, it's more like I am working freelance, so it's like more on my time based. So I'm also working at other jobs, but like it's mainly towards building up my portfolio. So yeah.
Okay, let's wrap up with a macro question. So the last question is like we talked a little bit about how competitive job market is, and then we know that technologies is evolving and then it's changing really fast. So can you share some advice to the young generation how we can keep updated and how we can make ourselves competitive and adapt to this fast-pacing changing environment?
So I think to answer that question, I would say two things. One big thing would be social media, specifically LinkedIn. That could help out a lot. Try to keep your LinkedIn as updated as possible because there's always recruiters or people looking out at what's happening in your life. So if you're just posting about like, oh, I just got this new job, just don't only do that. Also boast about, oh, in my first week of my job, I did this and stuff like that. In my case, what I do is, so when I do an article for Yahoo, for example, I post about this is my first piece, and then I give like a little quote of this what's happening, and just post about that, for example. And a big part of LinkedIn also would be like reaching out to people, and it also has this feature called open to work, so people know like you are open to work. LinkedIn is a big part, but at the same time also keep your other social media. As journalists, we also use Twitter a lot, so I also try to keep up with Twitter with all the nonsense that's happening with Elon Musk taking over, and it's been happening from the past like 50, 60 years. People have been using like Twitter. Emailing people would be a big part of too. So one big tip would be actually reaching out and not be scared, because sometimes you never know what will happen. Also, ask for mentorship, because I think mentors could really help people when it comes to going to their next job opportunity, or even just asking about questions about what they're doing. And just having some sort of mentor or someone you look up to could help you build your own space or build what you want to do in the future too. In the sense they are able to guide you, but at the same time, a big part of what I'm all talking about is just reaching out. Because if you won't reach out, or if you don't network with people, that connection won't happen, or you will miss out on that type of mentorship or something. So the final thing would be also networking, actually talking to people and going out to events, because networking is a big part of growing yourself. Because what happens is a lot of times you never know someone's hiring, and you're just talking to the person who's hiring. So going out to events and talking to people is a big part of how you could make new connections and expand on your network.
Yeah, I think the power of LinkedIn and the power of networking is just really amazing. And then just talking to people, you can see others people's perspectives, their experience, and then I think job opportunities just arise while you just communicating with others. So yeah, those are really wonderful advice. And thank you so much for sharing with us about your experience, about your career development, and etc. So that's the end of the podcast today. Thank you so much, Kuwarjeet, again for being on our podcast.
Yep. Thank you for having me.